We're out here at our local ORV park to show you why you want a set of sliders for your new Ford Bronco. Now, anybody who's been off-road before, well, it should be pretty obvious. It's all this unprotected sheet metal between the front and rear tires. And even if you have those small rock rails from the factory, you don't have a lot of protection. And that's why you want sliders. The sliders we chose are the Destroyer series sliders from LoD Off-Road. LoD has been building heavy-duty parts for the Jeep line of vehicles for years. And if you're a longtime follower, you've seen us install many other LoD products in the past. They build a solid product designed to take the abuse both from the trail and from those rogue shopping carts that tend to attack when no one is looking. The Destroyer sliders for the Bronco are built from heavy gauge steel that is formed and welded for strength, and then powder coated black for durability. Now they set out from the rocker line just over 4 inches to help keep the trail dangers away from your sheet metal and feature inset steps to help make climbing in and out of the vehicle easier. So how hard is it to install a set of Destroyer series sliders from LoD? Well, let's find out. These are the frame mounting brackets for both the LoD Destroyer series and the LoD Armor Light series sliders. So the installation is the same no matter which sliders you have. We're starting on the driver's side, but you could start on the passenger side if you want. On the driver's side, we do have the brake line brackets here at the frame and these little tabs that hold the wiring harness in. So we use a harness trim tool and we're just gonna pop those off the frame. And then we're gonna wanna clean the frame where the brackets go. So I just got a rag with some cleaner on it. And that's just so we're not trapping dirt underneath the frame. One thing we've always liked about LoD parts is that they come with full-size hardware call-out sheets. And that's so you can lay out all the hardware and then figure out what is what, which is which, and who goes where. Now, once you have everything laid out, make sure you separate the 2 metric M12 by 45 mil long bolts. These are going to screw up into the factory threaded holes on the bottom of the frame. Now, one of the things you want to check is that the mounting brackets need to sit flush up against the frame. And a few of our frame welds, they've kind of pooched out. So we're going to take a sanding disc on a hand grinder and we're going to sand those high spots flush. Then we're going to clean and paint the bare metal to protect it. Now grab those M12 bolts, install a flat washer, and get those rear mounting brackets up against the frame. Run the M12 bolts up into the factory threaded holes, and that's going to hold those brackets in place. Now we used a floor jack and a block of wood to do the heavy lifting for us. For the 2 center holes, we're going to use the big 4.5 inch long bolts with a flat washer, and they're going to go all the way through the frame. And on the inside of the frame, we're going to use one of those big 5/8 washers, then a 1/2 inch washer, followed by a nut. Again, we're going to use a 4.5 inch bolt to go all the way through the frame, then a big washer, followed by a smaller washer, and then followed by the nut. Now we do have to drill out 2 holes in the frame at the front of the large frame bracket. Use a paint marker or similar to mark both of the holes and then pull those brackets back off. Now there is a rib inside the frame right near our mark, and the hole in the bracket is slotted. So just make sure to go a little above or below that rib to make sure that you can clear it. Use a center punch to start your holes and then get the drill out. We always start with a smaller pilot bit, say a 1/4 inch, and then move on up in sizes till we get to our final size. On the hole in the side of the frame, we do need to drill all the way through the frame. So make sure to use a bit that's long enough to reach all the way through. One important note, on the passenger side rear bracket through bolt, you need to make sure not to drill through the frame and into the plastic fuel tank. We buried our bit as far into the drill chuck as possible and then checked depth by setting the bit up against the frame, and it was still too long. So we found a washer and a nut that fit snug on the drill bit and used them to space it out. For the front brackets, you need to use the big flag nuts. This one is marked FP2. It's the number 2 flag nut for the front passenger mount. Now we're going to slide that flag nut in through the frame and then give it a twist, and you can see from underneath that the flag nut's going to line up with the hole in the frame. We're going to temporarily bolt the front brackets into place, mark the 2 holes for the mounting bolts, drop the brackets, and then get to drilling. After all holes are drilled, clean them up with a deburr tool and paint the exposed metal to protect against corrosion. Then it was time to bolt the mounting brackets into place. All bolts got some blue Loctite, and then they were installed in place and tightened up, going back and forth to tighten everything up evenly. For the rear bolt through the lower control arm bracket, you need to slide a spacer washer up in between the brackets. Then slide the bolt through, then the flag nut up in alongside the lower control arm. And yes, it did take us a couple times to get that right. On the passenger side rear mount near the fuel tank, we had to be careful of bolt selection. The shorter 4-inch bolt is going to go into the forward hole. The longer 4.5-inch bolt goes to the rear hole. We continued installing the brackets and hardware, evenly tightening everything up until the brackets were solid. Moving on to the slider install, we found that some of the mounting bolts can be a real pain to install through the back side of the slider bodies while you're trying to hold the backup plates in place. So we grabbed a tube of gasket maker, put a dab on either side of the bolt heads, slid the backup plates down onto the bolts and let them set up overnight, basically gluing the bolts to the back of the plates. Now we would love to see a slight interference fit between the bolts and those plates. That way you can pop them into place and they would hold them solidly. Now these backup plates and carriage bolts go in behind the sliders and through the mounting plates on the frame brackets. And in some spots, it is easier to slide one bolt through, install and nut a couple threads, and then pivot the other bolt up into position. You will also find it easier to move the slider forward and back to help get the backup plates into position. The gluing trick works great on the double plates. On some of the single plates, we found it easier to slide the backup plate in first, then the bolt, the backing washer, and finally the nut. Make sure to use some blue on all your hardware. Now, if this is going to be a boulevard cruiser, feel free to move the slider up as high as you can before tightening the hardware. However, If you're planning on hitting the trails, have the slider as low as it will sit to give you maximum clearance between the slider and the rocker panel. All right, so this here's the hardest side because it's so tight right up against this step inset. So you want to make sure you slide your step all the way over as far as it'll go. And then we're going to slip in from underneath the top stud first. And once we have that in, you can swing the bottom over and in. Now imagine trying to hold the plate and get a bolt up in through that upper hole as tight as this is right here, and you wouldn't be able to get your hand in through the other side. So that's why we glued those studs into the brackets. If you have a gap between the slider and the flange on the mounting bracket, LoD does include a few spacer plates. You might need to use one or two to even everything out. Once all the hardware is installed, adjust the slider forward and back until it's evenly spaced between the wheel wells. Once the sliders are where you want them, evenly tighten up all the bolts and your slider install is done. Now get out there and use them. So as you can see, a good set of sliders goes a long way in protecting the sheet metal of your 4x4. So if you'd like to get a set of the LoD Destroyer series sliders for your Bronco or even your Jeep vehicle, well, hit the links down in the description box below. And while you're down there, hit that comment section up. Let us know. What do you think of the LoD Destroyer series sliders? Thanks for watching today. We'll see you again soon.